Halo has kind of a weird history with boss battles. We've seen a variety of bosses throughout the series, ranging from a bullet sponge transformer monster to beating up an old man in a chair. So in this video, I want to talk about whether or not boss fights even work with Halo, and whether or not bosses should return in Halo Infinite. But before we get into all of that, I've got to ask that if you do find yourself enjoying the video, to please leave it a like, because it does help my channel grow and helps get the video out so more people can join in. And if you're new, consider sticking around. And remember that all the things I'm going to talk about are just one man's opinion, so if you have any thoughts of your own, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. Alright, so to kick things off, I want to talk about why bosses are so tricky to implement in Halo games in the first place. One of the reasons is because a big boss just kind of contradicts one of Halo's biggest design philosophies, and that's that you are the Master Chief, the deadliest warrior that mankind has ever produced. Think about how every fight in Halo kind of plays out. You walk into a room and take everyone off guard. Some of the time people are sleeping, and in one case even taking a piss. But you will walk into an arena essentially, and you are on the offensive, running around and killing everyone. Halo is about a power fantasy. You're the most powerful being in the room, but you're outgunned and outnumbered. Throwing a big boss in there with a huge health bar and overpowered attacks just slows the gameplay way down, because suddenly you're not as powerful as your enemy, and you're not playing offensively anymore. But regardless of this, we've seen tons of boss fights throughout the series, and I want to take a look at some of the ones that were really done right and why I believe that they worked. And first up is the classic example, the Scarab. So far we've seen it in 2 games, and they both worked in my opinion, but they operated very differently in both of the games. In Halo 2, I think it worked because it wasn't really a boss per se, but more of like a walking set piece, a dynamic arena. You didn't have to do anything to destroy it. You weren't attacking the Scarab, but instead the aliens that were on board it. It still acts as a boss fight and kind of fills that role, but it works with the Halo design philosophies I talked about earlier. When the Scarab shows up, you jump aboard and fight everyone on it. It's an arena with legs, essentially. Now in Halo 3 it worked very differently. It works more of as like a combat puzzle. It has one weak point, and you as the player have to figure out how you're going to get to it, using the tools in the sandbox around you. You could get in a vehicle and shoot the legs to stun it and climb aboard. You can shoot its side to reveal the weak point and kill it from afar. Or my personal favorite, you could find high ground and jump straight in and start working your way through, fighting everyone on board. When the Scarab shows up, you're presented with multiple ways that you can beat it, and it makes it extremely replayable. Now, moving on to more mini-boss territory, let's talk about the Brute Chieftains, the Hunters, and the Giant Sentinels from Halo 2. Now these guys work because they aren't really bullet sponges, they're just more unique enemy types with their own special weapons, attacks, and attributes. The Brutes are armed with a gravity hammer that will kill you in one hit if you get too close, or have a plasma turret. They can use equipment and either become invulnerable for a short time, or take your shields down to the power drain. Hunters come in pairs and have explosive weapons and a powerful one-hit melees, but they also have weak points all over their heads, stomachs, and their backs. The Sentinels in Halo 2 are shielded in the front, but the shield can be taken down, and they're also completely exposed in the back. What these enemies all have in common is that they're rare to come across, and they don't slow down the gameplay. One thing that Bungie did in their game specifically is that they had a philosophy not to take away control from the player. Every important or key moment you took part in, and although this led to some boss fights that landed kind of flat, it was still satisfying because in the end, you were the one who pulled the trigger and killed Guilty Spark. You killed the Heretic and you beat Tartarus. Side note, I actually think the Heretic was a decent Halo boss as well, because he wasn't that much different from the enemies we had already faced. We fought jetpack elites throughout the campaign, but he offered a slightly different challenge because he used holograms. I think fighting the Heretic is comparable to coming across a Brute Chieftain in Halo 3. In the sense that he works very similar to enemies that you've already faced, but he has a unique, defining attribute that sets him apart. But going back to the point, like I said, every important moment, you were able to be a part of that, and that's really important for Halo. I mean, look what happened in Halo 4 and Halo 5 with the bosses. At the end of Halo 4, you get locked into an on-rails quick-time event type scenario where Cortana is the one who actually ends up stopping the Didact, who actually didn't even die. He got killed off in a comic book, but anyways, I digress. In Halo 5, Jul 'Abdamah was the big bad from Halo 4 Spartan Ops, and he was just killed off like an idiot in a cutscene. At the end of Halo 5, what happens? You're put into another on-rails quick-time event to finish the game. It's just not as satisfying in my opinion. There's just nothing worse than when a boss is hyped up and then you don't even get to land the killing blow. That's why the Dark Souls games are so popular, because there's just something about watching the boss hit the floor that's just so satisfying. Halo 5 had plenty of boss battles, both in the campaign and Warzone, and there's a lot of potential there, but they all suffer from the same obvious, glaring issue. They're bullet spongy, the attacks are cheap, and the enemy is copy and pasted every single time. I'm looking at you, Warden. Throughout the campaign, you fight the Warden so many times, and every fight is exactly the same. You walk into a square room and the doors close behind you like a scene from Scooby-Doo. Enemies are summoned and the Warden pops up. You have to hide behind cover and occasionally pop your head up and shoot him as much as you can until he returns fire, and then hop back into cover. There isn't anything in the environment that you can use against him, and you just have to keep laying into him until he goes down, or pray that he pivots just enough so you can hit that little annoying weak spot on his back. It ends up playing out closer to something like Gears of War or Rainbow Six. And whether or not you enjoy that kind of gameplay is subjective, but there's a clear difference between this and this. Alright, next I want to talk more about Halo 5's bosses because I said they have a lot of potential and I want to elaborate on that. If you take a look at Halo 5's bosses, they're actually really cool on paper. You have high-level elites, which we've seen in other games before. You have souped-up ghosts and other vehicles, more powerful hunters, and a grunt in a giant mech. The Grunt Goblin, guys, just blows my mind with how cool of a concept it is. I honestly just really love this idea, and I really hope that it comes back in Infinite. So let's take some of these boss concepts and try and design them in a way that they fit into the Halo 3 sandbox. And we're going to single out the Grunt Goblin, take his design, and try and make him better. First off, we got to pick an arena to drop him in, and I think he would actually go really well with the Scarab arena from the Storm. Let's say that we're going to make him a little bigger and less agile. It can still fly around, he keeps all of his weapons and the witty insults, he's just bigger and slower to move. Let's say that like the Scarab and the Hunter, its armor is invulnerable to any other kind of gunfire. But like the Scarab and the Hunter as well, it also has a few weak points, and there's multiple ways that you can go about taking it down. One way to beat it could be finding a way to climb up on its back and either beat it to death or plant a grenade. You just have to find high ground and time a jump right. You could also get a vehicle and try to get around him and shoot the jets on his back to make him fall out of the sky and crash so that you can mount him. Maybe the mech could also be stunned by using something like a power drain, or you could shoot the cockpit shield with a plasma pistol and get a shot on the driver. If the Grunt Goblin was designed more like a hunter or even a vehicle rather than an OP bullet sponge, I think it would make for a really cool boss fight. But what do you guys think of some of the ideas I have for the Grunt Goblin in the next game? Do you have some other ideas of how it could work better? I honestly just think the Grunt Goblin is a really cool concept and I want to see it brought back in Infinite, just in the right way. Let me know in the comments so we can talk about it. The same goes for the other bosses in Halo 5. I think a lot of them are really cool concepts, and if implemented in a different way that complements Halo Sandbox, I'd love to see them make a return. So next, I want to bring up some other boss possibilities for Halo Infinite, like maybe we haven't seen before. The Banished are going to be a really cool opposing force in the series. They're essentially made up of a bunch of Covenant splinter groups, and they use a variety of scavenged supplies and weapons. There's just so many possibilities for enemy types, and that's what has me really excited. Like the Silent Shadow, they're a group of elites that are so skilled and so deadly that during the days of the Covenant, they were sent to hunt and assassinate Spartans. They basically had the same status as Spartans, where they were essentially thought of as like a myth. As bosses, we could fight different members of Silent Shadow that use different kinds of weapons and fighting styles. I'm going to throw up a couple screenshots of a new character in the series named Jaga. Jaga is a member of the Silent Shadow, and there's a few important things you can notice about him. If you take a look, he has what looks like a UNSC robot arm, robot mandibles on his mouth, an energy shield on one arm, and a sword on the other. A sword and a shield, that's not really a weapon combo that we've seen in any other Halo game. And he looks like he could be a really cool boss fight, but my only worry is that they're just going to end up turning him into more of like a bullet sponge instead of a mini-boss in the same vein as a hunter or a chieftain. It would be really cool to fight different members of Silent Shadow throughout the campaign and even in Firefight. But there has to be variety, and they have to work with the Halo design philosophy that we talked about earlier. Now, when it comes to the Banished Brutes, it would be really cool to see the Hammer Brutes come back, and it looks like we're probably going to via another toy leak, if you can believe that. You know, I still find it so funny and kinda sad just how much we know about the game from these damn toy leaks. But anyways, a cool way to implement them could be having different levels of like Hammer Brutes. The lowest level wielding kind of like the basic gravity hammer that we see in the campaigns and the games, and higher level brutes have hammers with different powers and attacks. Like the Fist of Rucht from Halo 2 and 5, where it can kind of shoot shockwaves, or some brutes that can use equipment like in Halo 3. What if we also fought different kinds of hunters throughout the campaign? Anything from the normal hunters we know and love to the big boys from Halo Wars. I'm sorry, I don't know their names. My point is that not only is an emphasis on mini-bosses important to Halo, but so is variety and the ability to approach every boss differently. Just in my personal opinion, that's what makes bosses so memorable and fun to fight. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy Halo 3's campaign so much, because there's so much variety and the sandbox works so well with the combat. Every boss being super powerful and bullet spongy can just turn what should be a fun encounter into more of a chore. Especially if it's the same goddamn idiot all the time. Halo Infinite has a lot of potential for really awesome and memorable encounters. With seemingly a return to the sandbox style gameplay and the amount of possible enemy variety that 343 has set up for themselves, there's just so much they could do and probably will do over the next 10 years of Halo. But if there's one thing that I hope 343 has learned over the last decade, it's that Halo needs to stay true to itself. Halo can do boss fights, but they have to be Halo boss fights. But that is going to do it for the video today, guys. Let me know your thoughts on some of my ideas, especially the Grunt Goblin, in the comments down below. Remember to leave a like if you enjoyed, because it does really help out the channel. Feel free to share the video out, and if you're new, consider sticking around and subscribe for more videos like this one. But thanks for watching, guys, and until next time, have a good one.